All right, let's talk some Lions draft here. Very explosive day one. They were, kind of a big winner of day one, and some interesting moves here. Even with their, four top 100 picks, all guys who I think are good prospects. So let's start off with. So just so you know what you're looking at, next to me, that's the list of players they got. The number on the left, where they went. Number right next to their name is where they were on the consensus draft board. And Aiden Hutchinson was number one on most people's draft boards. He was number one on my draft board. I can't believe the Jaguars did not take Aiden Hutchinson one overall, but the Lions said, hey, thank you very much. I think maybe the earliest we've ever seen the second overall pick get turned in, which is funny because, like, obviously, where you're going, but, so like you have a plan A and plan B. You don't need any other plans for number two overall. But that was still kind of funny. He's just awesome. He's great. It's a cool story about how apparently he lives like 30, 45 minutes away from from the Lions Stadium. Like, I think that's cool. So awesome story. And on top of it, he's an awesome player. He's really good. He gets a ton of wins and all this, like, well, Walker's a better athlete. Hutchinson is an insanely awesome athlete. Like, this whole, like, Hutchinson isn't as good of an athlete as some of these other guys narrative is nonsense. He's a fantastic athlete. So I could talk about Hutchinson all day, but this was an obvious pick if you can get him at number two. And once I found out this was a real possibility, I got very excited for Lions fans because this is a great player. And another great player in a position of need as well is Jameson Williams, going at number 12. He was number 13 on the draft big board. And initially, when this happened, I liked the player, but thought it was kind of weird to trade up when you are a team that has as many holes as the Lions do. But you didn't trade up typically how much you have to trade up for that value. I think typically that will require like a future first. Like, that's what we've seen in the past. I remember the Chicago Bears had to give up a first rounder to move up when they got Justin Fields last year, for example. But this draft is a little bit different. For one thing, there isn't as many high-end quarterbacks. I think because of that, you're not going to get as much value with a trade back. So interesting move with the Vikings. Vikings still, made a lot of interesting moves. But for the Lions, I mean, Jameson Williams has potential to be a wide receiver one. He was my favorite wide receiver in this draft class. The injury thing isn't great, but I have confidence he will return to form and could be just an elite, explosive wide receiver, which the Lions desperately need. The Lions did not go quarterback at any point in this draft. I was surprised they didn't take a flyer on a guy eventually at a certain point. I think they're waiting for next year, perhaps, when Jared Goff's contract will be off the books. Or maybe they like Goff. I don't know. But Williams should be fantastic. And again, yes, it's great that you've got the trenches down, but you have to build the other stuff. You have to get receivers. They've got some nice guys who I'm interested in. Like the DJ Chark signing, I think, is interesting, but they need someone who has potential to be elite. That is Jameson Williams. Here at pick 46, it's a bit of a reach in terms of the consensus big board, but I still kind of like it. Josh Paschal, again, if we talk about how if you have production at college, that tends to translate well to the NFL level, Paschal is a guy who had production at the college level. His run defense in particular. And again, I measure production differently than other people. A lot of people like to look at, like, oh, how many sacks did you get? I have no idea how many sacks he got. That's completely irrelevant to me because it's such a fluky stat. I care more about like pressures and also like, maybe using run defense grades and things like that. Run defense grade was awesome. Pass rush win rate, about 16%. So that's solid. It's not spectacular. He's not a pass rusher. Like, he's not a pure pass rusher. That's not what he's getting drafted for. Not to say that he can't do it, but that's just not his strength. His strength is in the run game, which he should be good at. So you're getting someone who I think is a quality prospect here at pick 46. And then at pick 97, Kirby Joseph, who was 102 on the big board, on the consensus big board, but I would have had him higher. I think he's a guy who, I mean, there were some rumblings at a certain point of him being like a top 50 prospect. So getting him at 97, this feels like, I remember, having the argument of like, should Kyle Hamilton go number 2 overall? And the argument against it is like, no, because you can get a safety later on that should still have value with the 97th overall pick, which is what they did. And I think that that's why, he should still have, he won't be Kyle Hamilton, but he should still have good value at that position. With their next two picks, first, they're getting someone who seems like maybe a bit of a risk factor in James Mitchell, a tight end with some injury history, but seems like he's, someone who's a solid athlete and could be someone who has potential to have some value here in round 5 at pick 177. Also, Malcolm Rodriguez, I'm actually really fascinated by. He's someone who he was a former safety. He now plays linebacker. He's, only 5'11". Is a little bit bigger though at around 230, so that's nice. He's someone who was actually like a good linebacker last year, so that's kind of where it's interesting. Is in round 6, you're getting someone who was a legitimate good player. So that alone, like, okay, that's gonna, I'm gonna find that interesting, especially when we're talking picks this late. The final two picks, James Houston, edge rusher, who, seems like more of a speed guy. He did have production in college. I haven't looked too much into him as a whole, but he seems like someone who at least has some production and could be a fine, flyer to take on a guy at 217. He's probably not going to be a star, but, there's reason to believe he could potentially be a rotational guy. And then finally, Chase Lucas, who is currently 25 years old. So that's not great. But again, he's someone who's a solid player. So you're getting a couple guys who can play football. And that seems to be a big aspect of what the Lions have done with this draft. Is like, I'm not concerned about these. They took some flyers on guys, but the flyers they took was like, okay, you have injuries. Everyone they got, it seems like they were good at football, which seems like kind of an obvious thing to say, but that's not the way that a lot of teams draft. A lot of teams look for traits. They look for, what can we mold you into? It seemed like the Lions had a draft very similar to how I would have a draft, which is who are just the best players. Like, okay, forget injuries because they don't care much about that. But other than that, like, we're just going to take the guys that have no risk, that we know can come in and at least be decent players. And with this, again, the Lions are still a little bit away. I don't think that they're ready to be competitive quite yet. I still think that they're a little bit away, but, we'll see what they do with the rest of free agency. And, once I start looking through all the rosters, that's when I really can figure out who I think could be playoff teams and not. My gut right now says they're still at least a year away. But what you have added is an edge rusher, potentially 2 edge rushers, a good wide receiver, and a safety. So these are all prospects. Who knows how it works out? But if you just got those 4 guys and then some depth in this draft, that's a really good draft that's helping you get a lot closer. So that's what I think about the Lions draft. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on this draft? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.